The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. There was a scholar of the law who stood up to test Jesus and said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" He said in reply, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." He replied to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." But because he wished to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man fell among robbers as he went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. They stripped and beat him and went off, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that road, but when he saw him, he passed by the opposite side. Likewise, a Levite came to the place, and when he saw him, he passed on the opposite side. But a Samaritan traveler who came upon him was moved with compassion at the sight. He approached the victim, poured oil and wine over the wounds and bandaged them. Then he lifted him up on his own animal and took him to an inn and cared for him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper with the instruction, "Take care of him. If you spend more than what I have given you, I shall repay you on my way back." Which of these 3, in your opinion, was neighbor to the robber's victim? He answered, "The one who treated him with mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This evening's Gospel is probably one of the most popular and famous of all Jesus' parables, the Good Samaritan. And that word, the Good Samaritan, has been incorporated into the English language and is very often used to name institutions of various kinds. Good Samaritan Hospital, Good Samaritan Clinic, so on and so on. That's how important and popular that title is, the Good Samaritan. This young lawyer, obviously Jewish because he can quote the book of Deuteronomy, wants to know what will lead him to eternal life. And Jesus says, "What does the law say?" And he goes on to quote the book of Deuteronomy. And it's so good that Jesus gives him an A+. But he's a lawyer. He's unhappy. Most lawyers are unhappy. Any lawyers here? He wants to define, you see. He wants Jesus to spell out, how far should I go? And Jesus tells him the story of the Good Samaritan. The road from Jerusalem to Jericho is approximately 17 miles through a very mountainous region, and it's very circuitous. It's twisty and turning, so that every time you turn a corner, you might run into a thief, because it was well known for that reason, for people who robbed and cheated and so on. And so that's what happened to this poor man. By the way, Jerusalem is 2,500 feet above sea level. Jericho, which is sometimes described as the city of palms, is 250 feet below sea level. So that gives you an idea of how descending the road is. And he's waylaid and he's beaten up and beaten up and brutalized and left half dead. A priest comes along, sees him, crosses over to the other side. We don't know why the priest did that, but perhaps he thought the man was dead. And if he touched the man, the law said he would be rendered unclean for 7 days. and therefore, of course, could not perform his duties in the temple. And then the Levite comes along, he crosses over to the other side. But then a Samaritan, the one that Jewish people looked upon as a downcast. In fact, the common name that Jews used for Samaritans was dogs. And yet it is man who takes care of him, pours oil and wine into a wound, bandages the wounds, and puts him on his horse and takes him to Motel 66. And there he pays for his whatever it would cost, and he said, on my way back, if there are any extra charges, I'd be very happy to reimburse you. And that is what happened. The great Vincent van Gogh, the Dutch painter, has a wonderful painting of the Good Samaritan. And you see the Good Samaritan, and you see the hills in the background, and you see him pushing the man onto his horse. And then on the left side of the painting, in the distance, you can see the two men disappearing into the dark, the Good Samaritan. So he says to him then, now, which of these men was just saved? And of course, the answer is so obvious. I happened to be watching 60 Minutes, I think it was last year, and I watched 60 Minutes faithfully every Sunday night because I like the program and I get a lot of interesting stories. And this was a story about a lawyer from Norfolk, Virginia. His name was Dr. William McGee. And it told the story how this surgeon, his free time, goes to Central America, to Honduras, Salvador, Nicaragua, and he is a surgeon, and he takes care of children whose faces are deformed, and so on. But of course, the demand is so great that he and his wife decided to establish an organization called Operation Smile, where volunteer doctors are sent all over the world to take care of children who are facially disfigured. 50,000 children have been helped by this organization. And not only does he send these volunteers, he goes himself, like this was about going to the Philippines. And he also teaches other doctors how to perform this surgery. In other words, Dr. William McGee is a good Samaritan, and he has taught other doctors to also be good Samaritans. The question of the lawyer was, who is my neighbor? But the question is, who am I? Who am I? Am I a good neighbor? You know, the Jericho Road walks through every town in Florida. It walks through every home in Florida. Because in every home, once in a while, there are also injured people in that road. People who are hurting, perhaps physically, spiritually, emotionally, intellectually. Maybe members of our own families who are injured. So I ask you again, who am I? Who am I? Because the road passes through St. Boniface Parish too. And there we are surrounded by people who are injured. So the question is, how do I respond to these people? Am I like the priest and the Levite? I cross over to the other side. I don't want to see them. It's a very important question for all of us. Because, just like Dr. William McGee, became a Good Samaritan, every one of us here this evening must also become Good Samaritans.